The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. This is amazing. What can EU bring to Africa? What do they have that always we hear European Union talking about coming to help Africa and Asia? And always they claim they have a better deal than China. Sometimes they say they bring things more attractive, something that will pull Africans back towards the West. You understand? Because they believe that they have lost Africa and they need to do something to get us back. He asks the obvious question: what exactly is Europe offering? The EU, he argues, can barely hold itself together. It struggles to bail out its own economies, its own member states, and yet it speaks as if it is in a position to rescue or reshape the global south. And this is one thing Africans, we don't, at least our leaders, they don't see. Europe, their economies are collapsing. What does Europe bring really? What do they bring to Africa? That always we hear them with promises. And he's telling, it isn't port, it isn't airport, it isn't railways, power stations, or large-scale schools. Instead, he says Europe arrives with something else entirely: glossy workshops, symbolic programs, and what they dismiss as performative empowerment. Like always they say women empowerment and those kind of things. Conference, panels, training sessions, carefully branded initiatives that look good in report but leave little behind on the ground. Small projects he admits exist, but nothing transformative. Nothing comparable to what China is physically doing or building in Africa. We are seeing the railways, we are seeing a lot of things that China is doing in Africa that EU, since we know them, haven't done now.
The president of the European Commission, the head of the EU, basically, Ursula von der Leyen.
Oh, her. I can't. I like it. I cringe.
We could do a whole show about her.
Just her, yeah.
But she said the other day, she made this statement that Europe and the West, I think this was in the context of the G7 summit that happened in Japan a few days ago. She said the West has to offer countries around the world, countries in Africa and Asia, something attractive, a better deal than China, so that they'll come over to us. Well, first of all, there's nothing you're going to offer as the EU that, you know, they can't even bail themselves out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you have to offer. You don't bring anything. You bring sort of these fake women's empowerment programs and workshops to countries around the world. You're not building ports and airports and schools. I mean, they'll do these little tiny projects, but they're not doing very much. Secondly, you bring the EU, you bring this racist, dominating attitude. Joseph Borrell, the EU foreign policy chief, said it himself a few months ago that Europe is a garden and the rest of the world is a jungle. Right. And people in Africa, people in Asia, people in the Arab world don't want that. We had that, thank you. We do not want Europeans coming from their garden and telling us how civilized they are and what we have to do in order to get civilized like them. Because we tried that in the 19th century, the 20th century, and before, and no thank you. We don't want to go back to that. But the bigger question is, why does it have to be a competition? Why is it Europe and the West against China and against Russia? As far as I know, the Chinese are willing to cooperate with any country. And Italy, as I understand it, was part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And they have been pressured to pull out of it by their so-called Western partners. So, and of course, China has major trade relations with the EU. China isn't interested in a competition. They're interested in cooperation. They see, you know, the cliche that Barack Obama used when he was first elected, and in his first press conference, he was asked what he was going to do for Black Americans who are economically at the bottom of the ladder in the United States, wealth-wise, income-wise, job-wise, health-wise, education-wise, due to centuries of systematic oppression in the United States. And his answer was, a rising tide lifts all boats. And of course, that meant
Ronald Reagan.
Exactly. But Barack Obama said it, meaning, I'm not going to do anything for Black Americans because I don't want to alienate the racist white vote that I depend on. But I think China actually does believe that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
And that's their approach, in the sense that when you build railroads and roads and ports and schools and infrastructure and training colleges and vocational training across the world, you also increase the opportunity for yourself to trade with these countries. You provide markets for Chinese goods and Chinese services and Chinese solar panels and Chinese cars and Chinese industrial goods and so on. And that could include the West if they wanted to. I don't see why they wouldn't want to, except that they have this deep need to dominate and to be the world's rulers. They think it's their natural place. The Americans call it American exceptionalism, and the Europeans, of course, America comes from Europe. So, that's where it started, and they can't let it go, and they are freaking out, and I think it means they're going to be left behind.
On my first point, energy and climate. Today, only 2% of global investments in clean energy go to Africa. This is sobering. This is very sobering, given Africa's immense potential as a clean energy powerhouse. Africa has the space, the wind, the sun, just to name a few. What it lacks is infrastructure. But together, we can change this. With Global Gateway, we aim to bring clean energy to 100 million people who currently don't have access to energy. This can turn out as a double win. Africa can not only produce enough clean energy to power up the African continent, but also to create revenues by exporting. Preparations have begun, for example, to build the first underwater electricity cable linking North Africa to Italy and the rest of Europe. And, for example, our new hydrogen bank is now open to African producers. This means good jobs, energy security for both Africa and Europe.
And then comes the second, deeper problem, the one he finds impossible to ignore, the attitude. He reminds us of a comment made not long ago by Joseph Borrell, the EU's own foreign policy chief. Borrell described Europe as a garden and the rest of the world as a jungle. And these are the people that are coming into Africa to offer us something beautiful. Like, how can we want to associate ourselves with people till they still see themselves this way and the rest of the world? To him, the sentence says everything. Because people in Africa, Asia, and the Arab world hear it loud and clear. They hear superiority, they hear hierarchy, they hear domination dressed up as diplomacy, and they want no part of it. Because this is the kind of treatment we've received from these people all these years, and they are not changing, even though they are collapsing. Things are not going on well with them. We have been there, his tone suggests. We have seen this movie before. Europeans arriving from their garden, explaining civilization, prescribing values, setting conditions, telling others what they must become in order to be acceptable. He reminds us that this experiment was already tired in the 19th century, in the 20th century, and even before that. Colonization, control, moral lecture enforced by power. These people are the only whatever, yet they have all these things and they can't use that to at least help their economies to thrive. We've seen how they are suffering every blessed day, and the verdict, he says, has already been delivered. No thank you. The world outside Europe does not want to return to that era. It does not want a foolish version of it wrapped in modern language and humanitarian branding. So when the EU says it wants to compete with China for influence, he doesn't hear confidence. He hears denial. Denial of history, denial of reality, denial of how much the world has changed. The only people who are not ready to change are these people. Yet they are the ones who are telling us how uncivilized we are. And in his telling, that is why the message fails, not because it is too weak, but because it is too familiar. We are already aware of whatever they do to us now. When they speak the language, we understand. It's just that a lot of us are still, and that is why they are able to maneuver us. You know how these people always come changing their approach. The same thing, but they rebrand it and give it a name, a nice packaging. So to the point that you, the African, you find it so difficult to understand the language that they are preaching to you. But they will never change. Europeans can never change. They always see themselves to be the best and any other person to be less. That's their motive. And even though now they are not who they are, we have a lot of things. Now the world is changing. Things are done differently, but the language that they bring is still the same. Wherever they appear, they need to be bossy over other people. We've seen that they don't have anything to offer us. Unlike those days that, let's say, almost all the youth believed so much in these people, even though majority of us still do. But I think some of us are not in line with them anymore because we believe that they have nothing. You have this amount of money to be investing in the climate change, in whatever, in Africa, in energy, yet you are having the same problems. But they always cover theirs and go out and prove to the world that they are the heroes, they are they are there to help people. You understand, especially Africans. They make it look as if we are their priority. And sometimes when you even hear some of our brothers and sisters defending them, you just know that, like Dr. Rekana said, we truly need to learn who we are because we don't know who we are. We don't know what we have. We don't know our continent. There are lots more the African need to study. Until we get that knowledge, it will be very difficult for us to win this fight. That is why a lot of us will go to any line to keep defending them because of the way they present their things. We are offering African this, we are donating that. We think that they love us so much, that's why they are doing that. But we have never asked ourselves, what are the living situations in these respective countries who always claim they are supporting us in Africa? We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world. In Europe,